You know, there was a stretch of time where Atletico Madrid weren't just a top side in European football, but a side who you genuinely wouldn't want to come up against. 2 Champions League finals in 3 years, Copa del Rey wins, a league title in 2014, and all of this while Barcelona and Real Madrid were very, very strong, and yet Atleti had outdone them on a few occasions. Except the thing is, in that list of achievements, the 2 Champions League finals amounted to nothing, just as their first Champions League final had. But the common thread in all 3 finals, despite being 40 years apart, is how Atletico was able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. An unfortunate soundbite from then club president Vicente Calderon went on to become a nickname for the club, but also, for some supporters, an explanation for their misfortune at the continental level. This is how Atleti almost became champions. This is how Atleti became El Pupas, the Jinxed Ones.
Diego Pablo Simeone ha sido presentado hoy como nuevo técnico del Atlético de Madrid hasta el año 2013.
But before we get to the origin of it all, let's kind of work backwards here, kind of at least, and start with Atletico's regeneration under a former player. When Diego Simeone took over at Atletico Madrid in 2011, it's not as if they hadn't won a single trophy for decades. In fact, the Europa League in 2010 and the UEFA Super Cup that follow that achievement. But when it came to domestic success, the last time they had that was in the 90s, when Simeone played for the Atleti side that won a league and Copa del Rey double. Since then, as a coach, he turned Atletico into Champions League mainstays while winning multiple pieces of silverware to boot, both domestically and in the Europa League. Sometimes when Atleti is slumping these days, we forget just how much he changed that club, and why he's held so close to the hearts of Atletico supporters. I mean, when he won the Europa League in the 2011-12 season, just 10 years prior, Atletico Madrid was playing in the Segunda División, the second division of Spanish football. But there's one area where even Diego Simeone hasn't been able to reverse the luck of Atletico Madrid. It's the 2013-14 season and Atletico Madrid are absolutely flying. As mentioned, this is not really a weak time in Barcelona or Real Madrid's history, and yet Atletico Madrid managed to go through the season with just 4 losses and 6 draws to go with their 28 wins, beating out Barcelona and Real Madrid by 3 points in La Liga, 90-87. It can't get much closer than that in the top 3, right? In that campaign, Atletico Madrid didn't lose to Real or Barcelona in league play. In fact, they managed to beat Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. In the Copa del Rey, heartbreak in the semifinals, as Real Madrid got one over them with a 5-0 aggregate win. I guess they got a few over them, actually. In the Champions League, however, Atletico Madrid were unbelievable. They win their group by a long shot, not losing once. Then they beat AC Milan at home and away, 5-1 on aggregate. Next up, who else but FC Barcelona, where a first leg tie at the Camp Nou set the stage for Koke's 5th minute winner at the Vicente Calderon, 2-1 win on aggregate. Next, a familiar foe in Jose Mourinho, who was once again in charge of Chelsea, a strong Chelsea side, but one that Atletico Madrid was up for. A 0-0 draw in the first leg served Atleti well. Remember, this was when away goals was a thing, meaning if they could score in London, then Chelsea would be in trouble. A score draw, and Chelsea's out. Well, Atletico Madrid found themselves down thanks to a goal from one of their own, Fernando Torres, but funnily enough, goals from Adrian and future Chelsea player Diego Costa would be enough for Atleti to go through. An extra goal from Arda Turan was just the icing on the cake. 3-1. So Atletico Madrid was through to the Champions League final for the first time in 40 years exactly. Again, we'll get to that final later. And who would Atleti have to face but Carlo Ancelotti's Real Madrid, the team that absolutely stomped them in the Copa del Rey in February of that season. They drew 2-2 in La Liga a month later, but they also knew that they could beat Real Madrid. They'd done so early. They defended deep and chose their moments to break forward, with Diego Costa's goal in the 11th minute ending up being the winner earlier in the season. When you look at the final score and the stats of the Champions League final from Lisbon in 2014, it looks like a completely one-sided match. Real had twice the attempts, 4 times the goals, but the chances for Real Madrid only started to really pick up in the second half, as Atletico Madrid tried to protect their lead from the 36th minute onward, and of course, the only stat that matters to decide a game is the goal column, and as of the 90th minute, Atleti led 1-0 in the Champions League final against Real Madrid and were denying them of getting La Décima. After Bale missed 3 good chances for Real Madrid, the referee's assistant signaled for 5 minutes of added time. Now, for any Atleti supporters watching, the 5 minutes seemed like overkill. They wanted the whistle to go ASAP to end not just the match, but this curse that they believe has followed them. And then, in the 93rd minute, Luka Modric hit an outswinging corner that was met well by Sergio Ramos, who put it out of reach of Thibaut Courtois in the bottom corner of Atleti's goal. From there, I mean, you know what happened in extra time. A collapse from Atletico Madrid, losing 4-1 to their city rivals. From just 120 seconds from becoming champions to a crushing defeat, adding further fire to the cursed or jinxed allegations. 2 years later, and Atletico Madrid are having another superb season, though domestically, with Luis Suarez joining Messi and Neymar and having an all-time career season, that helped propel Barcelona to the top of the table with 91 points to Real Madrid's 90 and Atleti's 88. Okay, it can get closer than 3 points, can't it? Still a strong showing from Atleti, but that second leg home loss to Celta Vigo in the Copa del Rey quarterfinals, Simeone will want that one back. But in the Champions League, they looked quite commanding. Well, they had that epic shootout against PSV in the round of 16. Not a single goal scored across 2 legs, but an 8-7 win in the shootout. That's a big one. In the quarters, taking on the defending champions FC Barcelona, they lose 2-1 away with that crucial away goal, only to beat Barcelona 2-0 at home to advance. I mean, they would have gone through with the 1-0 win, but Griezmann's penalty in the 88th doubled their lead. Their home dominance continued with a 1-0 win over Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich in the first leg of the semifinals, but the second leg was absolutely bonkers in Munich. Muller and Torres missed penalties for each side. The final score was 2-1 Bayern, with Atletico Madrid advancing to the final against Real Madrid again. Now, Real Madrid this season hired on Rafael Benitez, but he only lasted until January, until he was replaced by Zinedine Zidane. Good for Real, bad for Atleti. Real Madrid overcame AS Roma, Wolfsburg, which they had to come back from a 2-0 deficit, and Manchester City in the semifinals. And so, to Milan, where Atleti would take on Real Madrid in a Champions League final once again. Last time, Atleti scored first and had to defend their lead. This time, Real Madrid scored in the 15th minute after Sergio Ramos poked the ball past Oblak after a scramble in the box. Atleti would fight and fight in this match, pushing Real Madrid all the way, and in the 47th minute, prayers answered. Pepe gave up a penalty, and with Antoine Griezmann stepping up to take it, in the form of his life, he hit it off the crossbar. In February of 2022, Griezmann admitted that, quote, "To this day, there are nights when I see that penalty and I can't sleep." Half an hour later, however, Juanfran's ball into the box would be met by Yannick Carrasco, making it 1-1 and forcing extra time again. Was this a reversal of fortunes? Real Madrid were about 10 minutes away from being champions, only to have Atleti take it from them. Not as dramatically, but still, late. No, it wouldn't be a reversal of anything, as in the shootout, Juanfran would miss his penalty, Real Madrid would convert every single one, and Ronaldo would take his shirt off as Real won their 11th Champions League title. If you were an Atleti fan in 2016, then there would be no doubt in your mind that there is something supernatural going on. Not only did you have Griezmann missing the penalty in the 48th minute, which could have altered the match completely, but you also had Mark Clattenburg, the referee for that final, admit 4 years later that Real Madrid's opener shouldn't have stood because Ramos was offside. He said that he watched it back at halftime and he knew that he had got that call wrong in the first half. All of this misfortune, of course, a product of 1974. Atleti were quite the team from the mid to late 60s to mid 70s. A Copa del Rey in 1972 and a league title in 1973 saw them playing in the European Cup for the 73-74 season, where they defeated Galatasaray, Dinamo Bucharesti, Red Star Belgrade, and Celtic on the way to the final against Bayern Munich, who had an unbelievable team. Gerd Müller, Uli Hoeneß, Torstensen, Franz Beckenbauer, and on it goes. The final was played in Heysel Stadium in Brussels on the 15th of May, 1974. This was Bayern Munich's first European Cup final, and the same could be said of Atletico Madrid. We'd have a new winner from 2 new finalists. It was a tightly contested match, which required extra time to settle it after going goalless after 90 minutes. In the 114th minute, Atletico Madrid star striker Luis Aragonés stepped up to take a free kick and managed to curl it around the wall and into the top corner to make it 1-0 Atletico Madrid right at the death. 4 minutes later, and Atletico believe they have done enough to beat the Bavarians, only for George Schwarzenbeck, a center back, to hit a strike from midfield that somehow eluded goalkeeper Miguel Reyna. I mean, it isn't as easy as a high collect, but it's a save that Reyna himself has said that he should have stopped. And if you were wondering, yes, he is the father of Pepe Reina. Prior to the match, in every single match in Europe that Reyna had played in, he didn't concede a single goal. But the equalizer didn't force a shootout. For the first and only time ever, after 120 minutes, it was decided that a second leg would be played 2 days later. At this point, there are those who say that Atletico had already lost, they had already done the unthinkable, or nearly had, rather, in keeping Bayern off the score sheet for so long, and finding some magic of their own. In the second leg, Bayern steamrolled Atletico Madrid 4-0 with a brace apiece from Müller and Jones, winning the European Cup. What happened in the first leg, though? There are some who say that Reyna had promised his match-winning gloves to a Marca photographer behind the goal after Aragonés had scored, that he was distracted and perhaps celebrating prematurely. At least, that's what Atleti's manager at the time also said, Juan Carlos Lorenzo, as he told that to the media, but Reyna denies it. Following the heavy defeat in the second leg, club president Vicente Calderon said that his club are El Pupas, the jinxed ones, and of course, that would go on to become a massive, massive part of Atleti fandom, Atleti culture. For every misfortune, they cursed football gods for making them El Pupas. And you have to wonder, if they weren't playing their two most recent finals against one of the teams that has a sick affinity to the Champions League, would they have turned out different? A team like Real Madrid that feels like they always find a way in the Champions League absolutely feeds into the narrative of Atleti, unfortunately and consistently snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Or in 1974, to go up against a would-be powerhouse like Bayern Munich at that time, when they boasted one of, if not the best player in the world in Gerd Müller and of course Beckenbauer, had Reyna made that save, a save he should be making from that distance, how would the rest of their history gone? Would their success breed further success, as it tends to do? This notion of being the jinxed ones, El Pupas, is something that it feels like some supporters have adopted as fact. They can't get too excited for good things because reality will come crashing down on them. But like other curses in football, such as Benfica's curse of Bela Gutmann, there seems to be an inherited lack of belief in these players at the club, as if they buy into the curse and so they give into it, as they believe their mortal efforts are no match for the supernatural. But Bayern is a good example of how both winning and losing can be contagious. After their win over Atletico Madrid, they won the 1975 and 1976 European Cup. Atleti, well, you know how their future European endeavors went, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory in 2014 and losing the coin toss that are penalty shootouts in 2016. And so for now, El Pupas, they remain.